DJI sent me their Osmo Action 3 camera and asked if I could do a video review on it. I've been running it full time for the past few weeks, and I've been pretty impressed. My goal with this video is to show you how the camera performs in a variety of situations, highlight some of the features that I feel are particularly impressive, and give you an idea on if it's the camera for you. The spoiler is I think it probably is. So let's get into it. And if you're an eagle-eyed viewer, you'd probably already know that one of my most recent uploaded videos looked a little bit different than the others, and that's because it was shot on this camera. So thank you to DJI for sending over the camera, and let's get into it. But first, it's worth noting that every clip that you see in this video that doesn't physically have the Osmo Action 3 in it is filmed on the camera. So what is the Osmo Action 3? Well, this is DJI's flagship action camera, and there are a lot of big claims that come along with this camera. The first is battery life, where they claim up to 150 minutes of battery life on a single battery with no overheating issues. Those are big claims and something that I've struggled with on my current setup, which is the 𝙎𝙬𝘾. DJI also lists that the camera has a 155-degree field of view, an innovative magnetic release, the ability to record with 10-bit color, and goes up to 4K with 120 frames per second. On paper, this all sounds fantastic. But how did it perform in the real world? Well, first we definitely have to talk about the charging case. DJI sent me the Adventure Bundle, which comes with the charging case that can hold 3 of their batteries and charge them to 80% in under 20 minutes. I'm honestly surprised that they don't brag about this charging case more, because it's super convenient and it's a great way to carry around to charge the batteries all the time. It also can be operated in reverse, which means it can act as a power bank if you need something via the USB-C port. There are a few SD card slots as well, so it really makes the perfect traveling companion case. Now in terms of battery performance, DJI made some bold claims about it, but honestly it has been the best battery performance and battery life that I've ever seen in an action camera. I could go for easily 2, possibly 3 rides on one battery, and the fact that it comes with 3 batteries in the charging case means that I really don't have to stress too much about bringing several batteries with me. It's always pretty crazy to finish up a ride and see that the battery is still at like 60%. We've also, somewhat conveniently for this review, had some pretty hot weather here in the month of May, getting over 30 degrees for a few days. And I had not had a single issue with this camera overheating in all of that testing, and that's something that I cannot say about my primary setup, so I'm very impressed. Next up, we'll have to talk about the wide-angle lens. I've narrowed down my favorite recording settings to 4K 30 with rock steady stabilization, minus 0.3 EV comp, 𝙎𝙬𝘾 color, and the ultra-wide lens. The 155-degree field of view makes it wider than any of their other competitors that aren't 360 cameras, and it looks really, really good. It's just much easier to set up the angle when you have such a large field of view to deal with. You get more handlebars in the frame, which is more interesting. You get more people in the frame that I'm following, which is also more interesting. And the wide angle accurately depicts speed and steepness of the trails that we ride. It's also pretty impressive how minimal the distortion effects are on such a large field of view. Although pixel peeping image sharpness drops off a little bit toward the corners of the frame, DJI has done a fantastic job making sure that the image across the majority of the frame is crisp and sharp and in focus at all times. But what is sharpness without some accurate color? And that's the third point on how DJI has really impressed me here. I've been shooting with the 𝙎𝙬𝘾 color profile, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, and the footage has been very, very easy to color correct in post-production, and I feel that, at least with my level of color grading experience, it provides a more accurate color range than my current setup. Notably in the pinks and oranges, and you see on my frame on the top tube, for example, the pink tape reproduces much more accurately with the DJI camera than it has my previous 𝙎𝙬𝘾. Now I'm definitely not a colorist or a color expert, but I know that 10-bit color provides quite a lot more dynamic range in terms of color variance, and I'm excited to try my hand at color grading the footage more and seeing if 10-bit allows me to do more with it. But with my current level of experience, I can definitely say that my workflow has sped up with how easy it is to color correct. Now, when using the camera in an action scenario like mountain biking, hardware is important, but software is equally important, if not more so. And that's where stabilization comes in. Given that DJI's primary business is the global drone market, I would expect stabilization to be nothing less than a core competency of their business. And in the Osmo, they certainly delivered. I've been using Rocksteady mode, which is the lowest stabilization mode that is offered, and it has held up perfectly in low light conditions, heavy corners, in bottom outs, and in everything. I quite like how the stabilization algorithm places a heavier emphasis on the roll mechanic, where that would make sense on a drone, and it also makes sense when you're riding bikes, because when you go into a corner, you do lean the bike over and you do lean your head over. And that's something that other action camera manufacturers don't always incorporate into their stabilization. Personally, I feel no need to step up to the Rocksteady Plus or the Horizon leveling modes, because they crop in on the field of view, and Rocksteady just does well enough for mountain biking as is. To illustrate just how good the stabilization is at low light, here's an example clip that I haven't uploaded because I feel that it's too dark.
Oh my, it is very dark and very gravelly.
Honestly, it is too dark because someone at this race brought lights with them, and the stabilization's holding up just fine. Now, this is a situation where I can barely see, and yet stabilization is still very, very, very good, even if overall image quality may not be, because it is so dark. Now, I mentioned that I've tried this camera out in a variety of situations, and that includes a variety of different lighting situations. This camera definitely excels when the lighting is slightly diffuse, but mostly very, very bright. So typically I try to film videos in this time window anyways, which happens to be the few hours before sunset, but not so close so that everything is in the shadows. In harsher lighting conditions, such as the middle of the day in the forest where there's lots of patchy, high contrast sunlight, this camera does an acceptable job of making sure that the highlights aren't blown out and the shadows aren't too dark. Now, it's really hard to color grade this footage and try to expose it correctly without reducing the contrast to the point where I'm not happy with it, but that's more of a problem of when I chose to film rather than the camera itself, because it does quite a good job here. In lower light but still daylight situations, such as under a thick cloud, the camera does a great job of exposing the image, but this is the easiest situation to deal with. I didn't have the opportunity to test it, but I imagine that this camera would do quite well in direct sunlight scenes, such as skiing or riding in the desert. But you'll have to watch someone else's review to figure that out. Moving on from video quality, we can talk about the audio quality. And straight out of the box, the wind noise reduction on the Osmo Action 3 is the best that I've ever used. Here's an example of the digital wind noise filter in action following a group of people down a very fast trail. Now, I don't think the audio is quite as good quality as my current setup, which is a 𝙎𝙬𝘾 with no digital noise reduction on, but a physical foam cover preventing wind noise. But when compared stock to stock, it is certainly an improvement over the 𝙎𝙬𝘾. I'd like to test out a few physical wind noise reduction solutions in the future, be that either a full foam housing cover or just double taping a mustache over to the mic area. The problem with that is that the mic is quite close to the lens, so I might have to get a little bit creative to get the same physical, like hardware style noise reduction that I do on my current setup. All that being said though, the software wind reduction is perfectly usable, and I don't think anyone commented on the audio quality when I released a video with this camera. DJI also sent me their wireless mic, so I'm pretty excited to try that out, and maybe that's the solution that I've been after that will provide even higher quality audio than my current setup. To say I'm a bit of a tech nerd is a bit of an understatement, so I'm gonna give this a go, and if you'd like a follow-up video in the next few months about how the DJI mic performs, let me know in the comments below. Now, apart from video and audio quality, which are of course the most important things in the camera, there are a number of pretty awesome user-centered details that this camera has to offer. The first of which being that magnetic attachment. It's great to be able to take the camera off and not adjust the angle that you're filming at. At least on my current setup, once I found the angle that I like, I do not want to remove the camera from the helmet, no matter what it takes. So being able to remove it and keep the same angle is a big deal, and to me that alone is more important than being able to flip between landscape and portrait in a convenient way. Because of how easy it is to remove, I find myself removing the camera from the helmet from time to time to upload clips to the computer or charge the battery, or to review footage in my hand, because it's better to use the camera when it's not attached to a full-face helmet. If you're more interested in portrait-style content than landscape, then DJI has included a cage for you in the box that allows flipping between both of them very easy and convenient. But for me, that's not something I'm interested in, because landscape is just king on YouTube, and you can honestly compress the footage to make a short-form vertical reel. Another thing worth noting is that this camera is smaller than my current camera. which is impressive considering the improvements in battery life and improvements in heat dissipation. When I'm out on a big ride, that actually makes quite a difference. After hour 3 or 4, your neck does not hurt as much. It still hurts a little bit, but it does not hurt as much. The last user convenience that I wanted to talk about was the beeps, or rather the lack of beeps. Now, I didn't expect to appreciate this feature as much as I did, but the fact that turning the camera on, turning the camera off, starting recording and ending recording all have completely different sounds is really nice and makes for an intuitive user interface. So you always know what's going on when you hit the buttons on your camera, even if you can't see the touchscreen, which for me as a mountain biker is pretty important because I don't want to have to take my helmet on and off all the time. I always know what the camera's doing. It's a really small detail, but it's one that I've really started to appreciate. And not having to count the beeps and figure out what Morse code language that is sending is really, really nice. Now, although my experience has been overwhelmingly positive, as you can probably tell by the tone of my voice, there are two things that I want to note in this video. The first is that I did have a few corrupt files on my first time using this camera. However, it did throw, after the files were corrupted, a slow SD card warning. So be aware of that and make sure you have an SD card that's fast enough to take the high bitrate footage that this camera exports, because if you don't, there's a good chance that it just might not be able to keep up. And I'm surprised by this, considering I had a pretty high-end camera before this, but I gather that 10-bit footage makes quite a big difference, and you really need the latest and greatest to be able to keep up. This was only a problem that occurred on my first ride, and ever since I swapped the SD card, I had had no issues with that at all. The other thing I did not love about this camera is that the DJI app is not available on the Google Play Store. You have to download it from their website and enable some developer mode settings on your Android phone in order to be able to install it. Now, I haven't had any problems with the app, and if you run an Apple phone, my understanding is that it is just on the App Store. But if you use an Android phone, that is something that is definitely worth noting, and just be careful out there. And with that, that is my review of the DJI Osmo Action 3, at least from a mountain bike lens. Now, who is this camera for? And keep in mind, I run a Hero 10, not a Hero 11, so I'm not comparing flagship to flagship. But when you look at the pricing between these cameras, the DJI camera is $350 US, whereas the GoPro camera currently is $400, discounted from $500 about a week ago. The GoPro likes to tout 5.3K video, which personally I think is a bit of a gimmick because I don't know of a 5.3K computer monitor, and I also don't know of a 5.3K TV, although I'm a bit behind on the TV side. The Osmo Action 3 does 4K at 120, which is, in my opinion, more than enough. And it offers a few unique creature comforts and usability features, such as the magnetic mount, the extra wide field of view lens, and the very impressive battery life. I think that the Osmo Action 3 is definitely worth some serious consideration if you're shopping for your next action camera. But in the end, it doesn't really matter what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below what you think of this camera. Video quality, audio quality, whatever you like. I'm really curious to know if this should be my new primary camera. And I'm willing to tinker a bit more to really dial in the settings, but I think there's something really promising here, and this camera should be on your radar. So thanks again to DJI for sending me the Osmo Action 3, and a special thank you to MTB Bikes for keeping me up and running during this trial period, because I had quite a few mechanicals, and they generously loaned me a wheel so that I could keep riding and actually film as much as possible for this video. So check them out at the link in the video description for a discount code on a custom wheel set. Hopefully I can clear things up, and thank you for watching.